Hey folks, Mark Johnson, Tech Snobs. We're doing a head-to-head-to-head. You got the HTC One Max versus the Lumia 1520 versus the LG Flex. I'm doing it like this simply for the fact all three of these phones have huge 6-inch displays on them. Now we're going to run through the specs real quick. I'm going to give you my thoughts on which one I feel is the best, depending on, what you're looking for. Now, first off, I'm going to start off with the HTC One Max. This phone's 6-inch display, quick rundown of the specs. You got a full HD 1080p display. You also have a Qualcomm Snapdragon 600 processor, which came out last year, which is the same CPU that's in the original HTC One. And you also have it on Verizon's 4G LTE network. You can see Verizon logo at the bottom. On the back, you got the same 4 megapixel, ultra pixel camera, pretty much a 4 megapixel camera that gets a lot more light. And then you have a fingerprint reader. You also have the ability to expand this by popping off the back. You can add in a 64 gig card right on the back at the top. So you do have expandable memory, micro SIM, and the battery is non-removable. So that's definitely the thing about the HTC One Max. I think the HTC One Max definitely appeals to those who like the HTC One that want a bigger screen. So that would be the reason why I would suggest picking this one over one of these other devices. If you like HTC, if you're on Verizon, of course, because Verizon doesn't even have either one of these other two phones. And, basically it's a full HD display. Nice display, but nothing really outside of the fingerprint reader and the micro SD card that really is much different from this phone versus the last one. Next, we're going to look at the LG Flex. Now, both of these are Android. The HTC One Max is running on, let's see, Android 4.2. Let me just verify that real quick. Yeah, actually it's running on 4.3. So it did get the update to 4.3. We're waiting on the 4.4 update, which just came to the HTC One. Now, looking at the LG Flex, very, very nice phone overall. As you can see, what sets this one apart, it's got a curved display. It's got a nice self-healing back. If you scratch it, it will, it will heal itself, so to speak. And then you also have the controls on the back, similar to just like the G2. So it's a different way. I mean, there's no buttons on the side of it, so it does take some getting used to, but it's definitely pretty cool. You control the volume and so forth right on the back of the phone. It does take some getting used to. Another thing with this phone is that this is out of these three, it's the only one that has on-screen buttons. There are no capacitive buttons at the bottom. So like everything's on screen. So even when you turn the screen, say if you're on a web page, the buttons go to the side. So they move themselves there. Overall, it's a nice device. I think looking at the specs with this one, it's got the Snapdragon 800 CPU, which is great. One of the fastest ones out there. And also it has, I think it's got 2 gigs of RAM, or it may have 3. Just verify that real quick. Let's go to... I believe it has 3 gigs of RAM on this device. Let's check something here. Go to the task manager. So I think it's just got 2 gigs of RAM actually. And the other thing about, camera's decent. I mean, I think it's better than what's on the HTC One Max. But the only downfall I would say with this one, it doesn't have a full HD display. Now, looking at it normally, it doesn't, unless you hold it up to another one of these devices, it's going to be just fine. But like if you've been looking at a 1080p display for a while, you will notice it. But I don't think it's a deal breaker by any means. But this phone is quite expensive. You can get it on Sprint, T-Mobile, and AT&T, and it's around, I think it's around $300 for the 2-year contract. So and another thing, it does bend. So you can actually take this phone, and it does bend for whatever that's worth. I mean, I think if you have it, sit it in your back pocket and you sit down, you don't have to worry about it snapping in half. But it's definitely kind of cool that the phone kind of bends and gives a little bit. And it's one of the first with a flexible display, and it does curve to your face. So I do like that feature as well. Last but not least, we're going to look at the Lumia 1520. Now, this one runs Windows Phone 8. This one's got a Qualcomm Snapdragon 800 processor, which is the fastest you can get currently. And it also, runs with a Windows Phone 8. Now, with the Nokia phone being, available, they have a lot of things that separate themselves. They have all these exclusive Nokia apps. If I go in, even just going into the store, on Windows Phone. You see a Nokia collection, and they just have a lot of things customized and, you know, fit just for them. They even have a look. Mobile World Congress is going on. There's a Mobile World Congress Nokia app. So they just stay on top of it with their apps and so forth. Very good job there by Nokia. Hardware and design, I mean, I think out of the three phones, it's probably the least attractive. I mean, it is a little bit wider, you know, as you can see, is the footprint there. Even comparing it to these two, just a little bit wide, so it's a little bit more unwieldy to kind of hold in your hand at times. It is pretty thin though. I mean, I do like the thinness of it. It's not super thick. You can see the curve on the curve at the bottom, with the flex rather. That makes it a little hard to kind of, you know, give an idea of how thick it is. But this is not thick at all as well. But looking at Nokia, I think the main thing about all three of these phones, this one's got a 1080p display, but I think what sets it apart, it's got a 20 megapixel camera on the back. That definitely makes it, is the standout feature. So if you like to take a lot of pictures, this is by far is the best one to get out of these three. Now I say that this is this phone being on AT&T, you know, that's another thing. You only can get it on AT&T currently. So with that being said, you know, you have some limited options. However, you can get this phone unlocked and use it on T-Mobile as well. So, you know, and you know what, folks, honestly, at the end of the day, it comes down to which operating system you like. I mean, both of these have Android, LG's custom version, HTC's custom version of Android, and then you have Windows Phone, which is pretty much the same on every device. So if you use Windows Phone and you like Windows Phone, I think you'll like this device. But when it comes around to, you know, the overall support, you know, with Nokia just being the Lumia line being sold to Microsoft, you probably are still going to get, you know, a good decent amount of support from Microsoft and when the Lumia line, because they're putting a lot into Windows Phone. With that being said, HTC's had some issues, you know, with supporting some of their devices. I think they did announce they're going to be supporting their One devices for like 2 years after you buy them. But HTC had some financial issues, and LG seemed to be doing pretty well. So that's another thing to keep an eye out in the future. I also will say that LG, I really expect them to come up with a LG Flex with a 1080p display. That would be the only thing I think out of these three that is maybe somewhat of a letdown. But, you know, for the price of this phone, you can get both of these phones. Let's say this is still $299 at Verizon for the HTC One Max. And then you have the LG Flex, $299. I think you can get the Lumia for $199. So that's something to keep in mind. So the choice is yours, folks. Personally, for me, I'm pretty much going with the Lumia. Just give me something different to mess around with. I definitely like a lot what it has. But I tell you what, when the new Flex comes out with a 1080p display, I'm going to be checking that one out as well. So thanks for watching. Be sure to check out the site, tech-snobs.com, for more coverage. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Take care.